Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cube Simplify. My name is Sayam Pathak, and in this particular podcast, we'll be diving into all things developer advocacy. This is a topic which is very near and dear to me because I have been doing this for a very, very long time. I have transitioned into different roles. I know how stuff works and some of the caveats and things in this ecosystem. But today, we have a very special guest with us, Ankur, who is the head of global advocacy at Google, and wanted to bring his opinions with the latest developer advocacy trends, how developer advocacy works at a extremely large organization and innovative organization like Google. So, very excited to have Ankur and talk all things developer advocacy. Ankur, welcome to Cube Simplify, and thank you for giving us the time.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So let's kind of start with your role. What is your role at Google with respect to developer advocacy, and what it means for you to be a developer advocate at Google?
Yeah. So I'm part of the Google Cloud Developer Relations team, and I run an organization within Cloud Developer Relations that we call Global Advocacy. Basically, a few years ago, I was already a developer advocate and I was managing a team, but I went to our Cloud Developer Relations leadership. I'm going to refer to it as DevRel from here on. I went to our DevRel leadership and I said, look, the way we do advocacy for Google Cloud, which is a big platform with hundreds of products, we tend to take a one-size-fits-all model. We have the way we do advocacy for our developers in the US is the same as Europe, and it's the same as APAC and Latin America. And I felt that we were missing an opportunity to engage more closely with developers. So we built out this model of having regional development teams, and that's how my team is spread throughout the globe. And basically, we have developer relations engineers who are at Google. We kind of use the word developer relations engineers and developer advocates interchangeably. Everyone has those same core engineering skill sets. But we have these deep product experts that are distributed around the world. And our aim is to engage with developer communities in a local manner. So the way that you might engage with developer communities in India is going to be different to the way you do it in places like Europe or Latin America. And so if I just give you some quick examples, in Europe, for example, we find that large industry conferences are really where a lot of the developer community tends to gather. Whereas in India, we still have large developer conferences, but actually there's a lot more smaller community conferences, smaller community meetups, and just communities overall in tier 1 cities, in tier 2 cities. A lot of that after the pandemic has also moved online. And so interestingly enough, in India, we've seen a really big uptake of like WhatsApp groups becoming a way for developers to connect. And then beyond that, you start to think about the fact that like in different regions of the world, there are different sort of policies and laws that need to be followed. In Europe, the big one is the GDPR, as well as the AI Act, for example. And so it really changes the way that you need to think about using cloud and AI technologies. And we have these sort of similar differences all over the world. And then finally, I'll say just even the languages we speak. So many developers around the world, English is not their primary language. For a lot of development work, you need to be able to speak English because if you look at API names and technical documentation, it often tends to be in English. But actually, it's you're able to relate far more to developers if you can speak the same language as well. And I think that was the last one. But I will also say one other thing that we've noticed is some parts of the world have different sort of local tendencies. So clearly in the Bay Area, people are like love on being on the leading edge. They are happy to look at the latest and greatest in technology and see how quickly they can put it in front of users. Not all regions are like that. You get some that are a little bit more conservative and they're happy for other places to go prove it out before they go and deploy it. So we try to. That's why my team is based the way that it is. Is we're still deep technical experts in the products, but we have very much a regional focus of how we help Google Cloud thrive in each of these regions.
Yeah, I think you brought a very important point over here, and it's interesting with respect to what you said. Like Google Cloud itself has so many services that it needs to be distributed in terms of how we advocate for those services, or how we talk to the engineers, or how we connect to the local communities, which sometimes do not speak the English language, or maybe they speak, but they are more comfortable in their own languages. So the local meetups need local representation. So that's where the regional groups makes a lot of sense. So I think that's pretty cool. Um, that's let's move to what I think my audience, or I think people generally interested in developer advocacy would be more interested to know is what is developer advocacy? Like people have their own set of definitions on what developer advocacy is. What is your sort of, own personal definition that you follow on what is developer advocacy, or what does it mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've been at Google for over 13 years now, and I know that developer relations and developer advocacy has a long storied history at Google. Um, when we first sort of defined the advocate role, at the time, the industry had a lot of evangelists, developer evangelists, folks that would go out and do conferences and spread the message, spread the word about the products. When we approached developer relations, we wanted to make sure that we had just as much of an inbound part to our role as we have an outbound perspective. So the word advocate was chosen very deliberately because we see an advocate as someone that can not just share a message, but also hear feedback and channel that back in. And so developer relations at Google sits, and there's developer relations in many different companies, but at Google, the model is we always sit with our engineering and product teams, like organizationally, that's where we're structured. That's who we're paired closest with. And we see ourselves as sitting between our product teams and our developers that use our products. And so, one of the questions that I often get when I'm interviewing people for the role, or people are interested in a role at Google, they say, what is the difference in technical skills between a developer relations engineer and a software engineer? And one of those differences at Google, for example, is you use a whole completely different stack. So the tech stack that you use to build our products isn't the same as the stack that you use, like in terms of using our products. So developer relations engineers or developer advocates, we're experts in our products themselves and how you use them. And we sit between our internal engineering teams and external developers so that as we build products, we are there to influence the roadmap. We are what we call zeroth customers. So we get our hands on the product early, and we provide what we call zeroth customer feedback, so that by the time it comes to developers using it, it's already been through a few rounds of feedback. We get to sort of champion the developer experience. But even then, we have it's such a broad platform and so many different combinations of using things together. Like we still get lots of feedback from developers saying this is a problem that can be solved pretty well with your tool set, but here's some things that could be better. And we take that feedback. We have a lot of empathy, and we channel that back to our product teams. Again, we have to empathize with our product teams as well, because they're also, building these products these are humans behind everything. And so we sort of try to make the case for why we should solve a problem differently, or open up a new use case or a new integration, with an open framework or an open tool set or something along those lines.
So within Google, are you associated more or aligned more with the program managers or product owners of the particular specific product teams, or more for the leadership? Because usually the PMs will kind of define the roadmap, what the roadmap would look like. And then there are a lot of engineers who kind of work towards that roadmap. Now, when you are working with the developers, and let's say you bring in certain request which is coming repeatedly that you might have heard at various conferences or socials, about one particular feature. How do you try to map that in, route it in, and how well it is respected within Google that, okay, this is coming from our developer advocacy team. Why should I even care about? Because I have my own perspective in where I want to take this with respect to our paying customers and things like that. So how does that work?
Look, ultimately, yeah, that's where the relations part of developer relations is really important. You need to have a good relationship with your product managers and even the engineering teams. Engineering teams, particularly when you're trying to reproduce a problem and you have to sort of dig in a little bit deeper and things like that. With the product managers, because you're right, they have ownership of the roadmap itself, and so we're all on the same team, and so it isn't. We rarely have these conversations. Well, I have this vision for this product, and what you're suggesting goes against that. It's more about trying to understand, sizing up the feedback and seeing if that is actually a use case that our product should do better at. Is that something that we focus on in terms of the problems we're trying to solve? So it's not as transactional as it may come across. We have ongoing relationships with our product managers and our engineering teams. We try to earn their respect, and we do it by that initial feedback that we tend to give with products as they're coming to life, but ongoing as well. So we do it's. I wouldn't say it's the exact same model across all of our product teams, but we do try to have a tight relationship with the product teams. We participate in their team meetings, for example, their product reviews, and so on. So it's just a synergistic relationship that we try to make sure that is ongoing.
Yeah, and I think that's the real essence, as you mentioned, developer relations. So it's not only the relations externally with the developers, but also internally with the developers that you're working with. So I think that's a very good point. Let's talk a bit about what work, the DevRels do. Like, how do they divide their work? So you described the developer advocates, and especially let's talk maybe about your specific team who is focused more on the cloud advocacy side of things. So what does a typical day look like? Or maybe let's take a busy day, and how would a developer advocate, or how would you envision a person who is joining your team to work on different sets? Like there is content, then there's blog, video, XYZ things, conferences and stuff. So what part of the job, or how much percentage of the job is bifurcated into all these segments? Like what does a work day look like, or a work month, or a work week, if you would like to touch on that?
Yeah. In some ways, we don't have a single template for this because we tend to have different efforts that we're rallying towards at any given time. So, for example, in earlier this year in Q1, my team ran a roadshow around the world. We did 24 cities around the world, where we went and delivered workshops to thousands of developers all over the world. And so our North America team focused on the North America market. Our APAC team focused on the APAC market. And so part of that was event planning. We work with our developer marketing teams and our community teams that we call into ecosystems to plan those events. But our technical experts, our developer advocates, were building out content, fresh new workshops, fresh new presentations, new narratives on how you can use our products in a creative way that inspires and motivates people to use our products. So at that time, there was a lot of that kind of work going on where we were building out that kind of content. And then, folks were on the road to go and deliver these workshops at all these different locations. So that's sort of when we've got these kinds of roadshow events happening. Not long after, we had the Google Cloud Next conference in April. And so a different set of the team was very focused on all the content that we need to deliver there, the breakout sessions, the live demos that we have at the actual booths. We did panels, and there's lots of developer engagement in different ways. Then on top of that, you've got your sort of steady state ongoing product feedback that I'd mentioned, and sort of making sure that you're participating as part of the product and engineering teams. We're always every advocate is expected to be publishing some level of content. So that's a mix of blogs, videos, code labs, sample code or demo applications and things like that. And so these are the kinds of high level activities, and like how you sort of weight those for every given individual also depends at what time of the year. So depending on what the priority, right now we've just finished, when we're recording this, Google I/O has just wrapped up. And we're now starting to think about what our next set of roadshows are going to look like. So we are spending a lot of time actually just building out, blog content and labs and so on. But we're also trying to think about what does the second half of the year look like for developer events? Where should we be? We also tend to attend meetups and, again, industry conferences as well. And so those tend to be seasonal. So different parts of the world, conference season, I guess it depends actually on the weather, the actual seasons of the year as well, between the North Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. So yeah, not a like, I couldn't give you a typical day, but here are some of the activities that folks do, and some folks will be leaning more towards one over the other at any given time.
No, I think that makes sense. And overall, how it's basically dependent on new initiatives, and then how the team is collaboratively working towards finishing those initiatives, and then planning what the next set of initiative looks like. And then in between, whenever there is time, there is content creation, there is video creation, and all those things follow along.
Yeah, and actually, there's one very important thing that I missed there, which I hold in a really high regard, and so does my sort of DevRel leadership team that I report up to, is learning. We are in an industry that's ever changing, and developer relations quickly becomes sort of out of date or stale if you're not keeping up with the latest product releases, with the latest technological shifts as well. So if you and I had spoken in November and I'd said MCP, neither of us would know that because it hadn't been published by Anthropic yet. And then if you look fast forward now, suddenly the whole industry is shifting toward making sure that you have MCP compatibility and interoperability. And so, these things are constantly shifting. And I think to be a successful developer advocate, you need to have a thirst for knowledge in this domain. And similarly, as a developer relations organization, you need to create the space and actual work time for folks to go and learn. And that needs to be a split between some sort of directional, hey, here are some things that everyone should go skill up on, and mixed in with organic. Some people just have more interest in like the Java space or the Go space, or Kubernetes, or, so you got to mix I think the best developer advocates are really passionate about what they do, and they're able to marry their passions with sort of the industry direction and bring those together. So, their fun stuff becomes their job.
Yes, absolutely right. Like that's how kind of I operate, because it's always the technology shift. Like we have seen the AI shift. I was not into AI, but seeing the technological shift in the AI, I now know LLMs. We have to know what services different cloud providers are offering. Vertex AI, Gemini. Gemini was not there a few years ago, so everyone is new to Gemini. So it's come. So now you have to learn how to use the API, how to use local LLMs, MCP, as you mentioned. So it's all growing. So yes, time needs to be given. Coming to the a follow up on what you just said, the success thing. It's kind of a tricky one, but I want to know your thoughts on two things. How do you measure success for the DevRels at Google? And then we'll come to the general question on, the regular key metrics of developer advocates. But first, let's say, how do you measure the success of your team at Google in terms of developer advocacy?
It's been a journey, and I think if you think about like what I've said to you about products and taking feedback and incorporating that and improving that, it's been the same way with how we measure success. Over time, we've continued to refine what the right metrics for success are. And I use the word right, but that's, frankly, an opinion, and often an opinion that's frozen in time. The definition of the right metrics, evolve over time. So the way we tend to look at it in at least the sort of Google Cloud developer relations team, we think about the developer lifecycle, and there's different stages of when a developer may get exposed to our product, whether they are at an early stage and it's that first sort of evaluation piece. They've just heard about it and they might want to go try something out. Or they may learn about it and may want to go and read a blog post or watch a video or something like that. It's very early. Most companies think of it as a funnel. We actually think of it as a flywheel, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then you've got the next stage, which is getting folks to actually go and act on the platform, to go and do something hands-on. And that's a big jump from going to like something I heard about to something I'm going to go and invest some time in to go play with. And hopefully, based on that delightful experience that you have, you end up continuing to use Google Cloud, either as an individual or you take it back to your workplace. And, for the next problem that you solve, you're telling your workplace that, hey, we should consider this particular set of products because it helps us solve this thing. Over time, if they're still continuing to engage with our platform, they're going to use more of it. So suddenly they go from just a retained user to a user that's starting to consume more of the platform. And at some point, some percentage of those folks end up becoming advocates themselves in the community. They become champions. You've been a huge champion and an advocate for the Kubernetes community, for example, right? And so there is a subset of folks that are wanting to also share the message. And that's why we get this flywheel effect, because in building some of those community champions and advocates, they end up exposing other people into, learning about the platform, and it moves on and on and on. And so that's why we think of it as a flywheel. So once you start to think about these sort of different stages of what a developer product or a developer lifecycle looks like, you then start to think about, well, what are the right measures for each of those stages? And what is the set of conversion activities that you need to do to graduate a user from one step to another? And I'll be honest, I think 10 years ago, developer relations was in a place where just getting out there and getting your message out there was like seen as success. Being as many industry conferences, meetups, videos, these are kind of relatively easy metrics to attain in terms of views or people in the room at a large conference. But it's very hard to convey the value that brings to the platform. So we've worked hard in Cloud DevRel to make sure that we can attribute the work that we do to each stage of that funnel or flywheel, and we're actually paying less attention to that initial awareness piece and eyeing our success. It's not attention. It's more that we deem our success based on how many people we're bringing to the platform and are helping to be successful on the platform. And by bringing to the platform, like literally hands-on, they're deploying workloads, they're spinning up clusters and things like that. So you'll see that, Google Cloud Developer Relations, we've really heavily skewed our in-person advocacy to doing workshops, because actually it turns out that folks want that. Attendees are actually happy to have someone sort of provide a guided experience into the platform. And two, we can measure that much more clearly than having 200 people in the room and we don't know what actually that attributed to in the long term.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because people, even if you are giving a keynote to 5,000 people, but how many people actually ended up getting into your platform or product or using your product is something hard to measure, because you can't scan everyone that is coming to your room. That is practically impossible. And this workshops gives an interesting way, because that is a guided experience. You already onboard a person to your platform or your product, and they have started using it already in some ways. And then going forward, they can be in a place where they deploy their applications or they go big and things like that. I think that's a good metric. But I want to pick more of your brains on the metrics. Like conferences is one. How about other things, other initiatives? And let's not take only Google now. Let's take a general developer advocacy audience and all the general activities that a developer advocates do. Like maybe they are learning for the 20%. That is fine. They are writing content in the pieces of blogs on their own platforms. Let's say google.com. And then they are writing on other publications. They are speaking at conferences, industry conferences, speaking at meetups. And then all on the YouTube, Google YouTube, they are creating videos. And then different other things that that they're trying. Maybe they are creating a POC, as you mentioned, like an interesting POC that people would want to use. They would want to start with that. Like that gives as a starter pack for some people to, okay, you just start with this and then you build on top of that. So all these areas, how you measure kind of, or
Yeah.
what ideal metrics, or not even ideal. It's hard, I know, but just picking your brains here, because why I'm picking is because that's the most widely asked question in developer advocacy. That how do any company who hires a developer advocate, they measure the success for the developer advocate? Because people come in with their own set of skills and expertise. Someone is a very good orator, they speak very well. Someone is a very good writer, like they write extremely detailed tech articles. Someone is very good at creating POCs. So how we kind of collaborate, or we judge on all these areas and try to see the right set of metrics, or at least have some metrics.
Yeah. Um, this has been part of the industry conversation about developer relations since the like inception of this in the mid 2000s. I'll tell you my perspective on this. All of those examples you gave, the video, the blog, the code sample or demo app, they aren't the end goal. They're in service of a different goal, right? And so anytime that you have this kind of content and you need this kind of content, absolutely. I always feel like you need a very strong call to action at the end of it that says, "Hey, let me tell you about this awesome thing, and maybe I'll guide you through how you build a complex AI application today." At the end of it, hey, if you want to go do this yourself, I've published a notebook or a code lab so that you can click a button and go and experience it yourself, right? That is how you're able to graduate folks from one stage to another. And so then you can start to think, this is why I come back to those different stages, is because you can start to say, well, I need more awareness overall because I know that there's a drop off before, some percentage of folks that read my content or view my content are going to come through. But if I increase the funnel and keep the same rough percentage, I get more people going and using the platform. And so you start to get these levers of, what do I care about more? The other thing is you need to think about like, who is your target audience? So as an example, developer relations engineers also get exposed to, customers. And, these are folks that are already bought into your platform, but they may be using one set of your platform and you have an opportunity to explain to them how they can use maybe a different database that gives them more capabilities, or, instead of using Google Compute Engine, which is our VM product, they could benefit from Google Kubernetes Engine or Cloud Run, depending on their use case. So you need to tailor it right. But at that point, you can start to see, well, what is the impact of this work having on that customer? But that kind of content is probably not relevant to the vast majority of general developers that like might be consuming your blog and so on. So ultimately, I think it comes down to making sure you have very clear goals set out of what you're trying to accomplish. And I think a company that's initially embarking on building a developer relations team, they usually like to start because they think that developer relations it's about getting the word out there, making sure people learn and discover your product and the value that you offer. But very quickly you move from, okay, now you've reached this many people, but what did those people result in? And this is where you need to start thinking about, you're doing that work in service of something else. So make sure you have that dovetail into the next step. And I feel like a call to action is a very good way to do that. You should measure those metrics. The most important part of that is the work that you do, it should be very clearly attributable to the impact metrics that you measure that are right for your business. So it could be developer activation. It could be retention, that maybe you have too much of a churn. People try your product, but they don't stay using it. So you might need a set of activities. So let's say you're doing a great job of running workshops. Even people have, like, you published code labs so people can self-service themselves. They can use your product. But at the end of it, you're finding that they do the thing and then they move on. Why do they move on? What was it that the next step didn't expose them to? And perhaps what you need is a part 2 that says, it's been 3 weeks since you last did it. here's something else that shows you what day 2 of this product suite looks like, or here's a different set of products. So ultimately, there isn't a one size fits all to any of this. It's about working out what are the specific goals that you have in mind, what are the activities that can drive towards those goals. And sometimes the goal is a second order goal, the activity is the first order activity, and you need to think about how that drives towards that second order.
Yeah, I really like a lot of points over here. The goal-based approach definitely is something that everyone should be thinking about, because I have seen like many developer advocates are super cool, but in the end, they need to showcase how they are contributing towards those business goals, because that is the key. In the end, it would matter. Maybe not now, maybe as you said, as starting point, awareness is something which is fine, but very soon it turns from okay, awareness is fine, but what next? Like, how are we converting those to the next stage? So, stage by stage, gradually moving them up, maybe retention, or maybe they are started using your product or getting onto their Slack and they started discussing some issues, helping out other people, identifying champions out of the people you have done the workshops with. Like, they would be the organic advocates from the community, identifying those. So like there is a lot of key things that can be done over here.
Absolutely. And look, I joined Google because I was part of the developer community, and that's how I found out about this role in developer relations. I didn't know that it existed. And so I always tell people, like, whenever you're embarking on a new like technological domain, find the community as well. It doesn't have to be in person, right? It could be on Reddit, or it used to be Stack, could have been seen as an online community, Stack Overflow, but it could be Reddit, it could be Twitter. I get so much of my like AI developer news from Twitter today, but also LinkedIn. So find what it is that where there's other folks that are like working in this space. And I think as a team, as an organization that's maybe embarking on developer relations, make sure you have those community ties. And it isn't just about trying to get on stage all the time at like meetups. It's also about listening and participating as much as it is about sharing your message, because you don't want to just be a loudspeaker. And then the last thing that I'll say here is, I said to you that one of the things that's really being core for developer relations at Google is us being close to the product and engineering teams. What that's meant is that we only hire people that have a very strong technical or engineering background, right? If you have been able to use these products, whether it's Google's products or anyone else's products, you come with a set of empathy of having been in that position that is really, really important. And you can build that over time. It's not that you can't, but having that experience in some domain. So you may have been a software engineer in the past, and these days you're more interested in doing sort of more AI engineering, whether it's prompting or model eval or something along those lines. People make these career transitions, and you kind of have to in this industry. But the fact that you come with that software engineering experience and you know what it's like to get stuck on a problem and try to find different ways to solve that problem, those kinds of skills transfer over to these other domains as well.
Yes, those are really really nice pointers. Okay, we have talked a lot of work that the DevRels do, but sometimes they end up doing a lot. So, what are your thoughts, or how do you give a message to your team about burnouts and invisible work? Because sometimes there are stuff that people are doing, and that's not accounted. So how do you take care of that, or thoughts on your team doesn't get burnout soon?
Yeah, I mean, if my team is listening, I'd be curious to hear their perspectives on this as well. I will say you have to be careful. So I actually had a conversation with someone just yesterday about developer relations as a whole, and I said to them that one of the most important things of being a developer advocate is the ability to say no, because you can do so. And I've listed all the different types of activities, and you can't be expected to do them all at once, right? You have to stage these things. And that's what I said to you about like the typical day. People aren't doing all of the types of activities in a given day. And so being able to say no, being able to make sure that you are able to keep your priorities in mind is so important, and tying your work to those goals that you're trying to hit as a team or an organization is really, really important. It sounds like kind of boring stuff, but actually it comes back to help you so much in the long run, where somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, could you give me we're going to launch this new SDK in the next few weeks. Could you go and run it, put it through its paces and give me some feedback? And the ability to say, hey, look, I'm working on this other higher priority thing right now. And so I can't, or being able to tell this other team that, look, this thing, I know I've been supporting you, but I need to pause it for a little while to go shift on this other higher priority thing. That communication is really important. The understanding of your priorities and just the ability to say no is really important, because that's what leads to burnout. With that said, I think a lot of the best advocates in the world, as I said, they have this. It's a blend between their passion and their job, and so sometimes this it affects work-life balance, where people can be working but feel like it's fun, and vice versa. And so you have to, as an individual, because it's very hard for a manager to help there, other than to make sure that you're not allocating a lot of work. But the individual needs to be also able to recognize that actually I'm taking on too much, and this thing that I'm doing is now work stuff that I'm doing way beyond what I should be in work hours. Work hours aren't fixed. We all go through some level of crunch where we're so my team has gone through it with Cloud Next and Google I/O, and even some of our roadshows. As you come close to these things and you're being very ambitious about the code lab you're building, you're trying to build all these, integrate all these nascent products that don't quite work right, and suddenly you're working long hours. As soon as that piece of work is delivered, take time off. Get back the time that you put in, and make sure your body gets an opportunity to recover, because it's unrealistic to expect that you'll never have extenuating circumstances. And then the last thing that I'll say is be a bit protective of your time. Now, this is both for an individual as well as for a manager or a leader of an organization. Don't commit in your planning. Don't commit to 100% of everybody's time or your own time, because there's going to be interruptions, and you're better off keeping a buffer for those interruptions than being at 100% capacity and then having another 20% added on top at the end there. That's not an easy thing to do, but it is really, really important to be able to realize, in our industry, this is a marathon, not a sprint. At any given time, there's massive technological shifts happening, whether it was the internet, whether it was mobile phones, whether it was cloud, now it's AI, who knows what's next. So there's always going to feel like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm delivering at full pace all the time. You're going to burn yourself out there. Keep some time, protect your time a little bit.
I think those are really nice points that you shared, especially on working on the priorities, learning to say no, which is very important, and also understanding, even if it's your passion, you might have a family, you might want to go to friends, and you might want to spend additional time. So yes, this is very interesting, because this particular role is kind of divided in the passion and love for the technological piece or what you enjoy doing. Then you end up doing more and more, because that is something you enjoy. Obviously when you are doing something that you enjoy, you end up doing more naturally. But rightly pointed that there might be scenarios where you are just extending too much, and you are thinking you are enjoying, but you are connected to a lot of other people in your own very near circle. So you need to take care of your time and how you are perceived, or how you would want to use that particular small extra time in different ways. So I think that's important, because I see a lot of times on socials that people do a lot for 3 months, 4 months at a stretch, and then there are posts coming up that I have burned out and now I'll take a month or 2 month break. So instead of doing that, try to nurture the time that you're already having from the beginning, so that you're already taking small breaks. As you mentioned, you have done 3 big events. Take a small break, relax your mind, and then come back again. So you take small breaks in between, or you twist your time in a way that you every day you are having some peace time with yourself and you are, in that calm zone?
Yeah, for me, it's the learning time that is a good time for that sort of rest and recovery, because you learn at whatever rate you learn at. Sometimes you have productive days, sometimes you have slow days because you're tired, or what, there may be other things going on in your work life or your personal life that impede you, right? So yeah, and then the one last thing I'll say is for developer relations leaders or folks that manage or lead developer relations teams, create a culture where people can say no, where people can have an open conversation with you that, hey, you just told me that we have 3 priorities and now you're adding another 2, like something's got to give. Because if you can create that transparent culture, I think people will feel more comfortable being able to talk about it. You won't burn people out. You won't lose good people as well through this. But it really does go down into team dynamics and culture.
Nice. Yes. It's I see a lot of times, because now what has happened is over the years, the yes, big companies have a lot of investment in their cultures. Google has done a lot of investment in the cultures and how they hire people, how they nurture them in terms of you learn and stuff. But as startups, it's basically, you do just everything
Yes.
there. So I think there it becomes important, if you are hiring for a developer advocate or a DevRel, you need to make sure I mean, I know the expectations, because I have worked at the startups. The expectations become too much. You do everything. So there has to be segments where, okay, these are the set priorities that we'll be focusing on this quarter or this month. And then apart from that, if anything urgent, because everything is urgent when it's in startup mode. So if anything very critical comes in, then there has to be, the priorities needs to shift. So what
Exactly.
was works, it can't be like everything in works is in works and you add one thing on top of that.
Exactly. You said it right. To take something on, sometimes when you're at capacity, to take something on, you've got to take something off. That's
Yes.
just the nature of the beast.
So Ankur, let's shift gears a bit and let's do a bit more fast Q&A kind of thing, like faster rapid fire kind of things. So at which stage of a startup you think a startup should invest in developer advocacy or developer?
So I'm making the assumption that that any startup that's thinking about this has a developer tool, developer product, or developer platform of some sort. I think it's at the time when you are trying to go get customers beyond, some small set. When you're trying to, when you have a sales-led product, then you can kind of get by without a developer relations team. But when you're trying to have what the industry is starting to call product-led growth, and you want it to be able to organically grow, you want to raise awareness, you want to have people come and find the product and use it themselves. That's why I think a developer relations engineer plays a really important role, because, as I said, they can be an expert in your product as opposed to, what a traditional software engineer will be, focused on the tools to build your product. So you want to have that product expertise in your product. You want to make sure it's got a great developer experience, and that's the time when I would try to hire for developer relations.
Okay, and follow-up question: when companies are hiring a developer advocate, what's one thing that they should keep in mind?
One thing they should keep in mind.
One key thing.
I, I I always look for 3 skills in a developer relations engineer every time I hire. One is deep technical expertise. 2 is really strong communication. Um, a developer relations team never owns the product, so they have to be able to have strong influence. You need to be able to have really a good way to describe why something is important and convince people. And so that communication skills becomes important internally, and then, of course, externally, because you're going to be writing blog posts, you're going to be presenting on stage, and so on. And then the third thing that I look for, which I think is not one that comes to people immediately when they think of developer relations, is empathy. You need to be able to empathize when you're getting feedback from someone that someone's struggling with using your product. And when you channel that feedback back to your engineering teams, you need to do it in a way that recognizes that they're also at capacity and they're going to have to turn something down, like deprioritize something in order to focus on this thing. So you need to be able to look at the big picture and empathize in both internal and external directions.
Yep, empathy is the key, definitely. Uh, Moving on, how has AI impacted developer advocacy as a role? Not in terms of the products, because Google has a lot of products that has actually increased a lot of things that developer advocates can do. But as developer advocate as a role, how do you think AI has impacted?
One of the things I said to you earlier was about like upskilling and making sure that your skills are current. And like with the arrival of AI, the pace of change is faster than than it's ever been before. If you think about models, protocols, tools, it is you have to work really hard to keep up. So I think that's probably where I'd say the biggest impact has been. It's of course been very useful for us in terms of helping us, polish our content and things like that as well. And we're starting to use it more and more in a relevant way. But I think the biggest impact to us actually has just been it's accelerated the pace of change and keeping up and making sure that we are as ahead of the curve as people expect us to be is a bigger challenge now than it's ever been.
Upskilling is the key. So, uh, what are your thoughts? This one is I want to know your thoughts. Like, what are your thoughts on DevRel as the first job out of college?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I feel like there's a lot of developer relations skills that you can actually build for yourself even before you get to college or university. And those are that, like, if you look today, like open source code, for example, anyone can get their hands dirty in an open source project. All the tooling is available. I'm a much older individual. So back when I was young, compilers cost thousands of dollars and your home desktop wasn't good enough to be able to use those. Documentation came in big fat books, right? And so it's very easy to get started now. And so I think that people can start to develop those like skills about what a developer experience should look like much early on. Coming straight out of university, though, if you think about developer relations, it's about championing the developer experience, but also communicating and advising people. So I think given that you're straight out of university, your ability to advise folks is probably a bit limited unless you've been involved in a developer community already and you've been championing it, or you've been part of an open source community. So this is where I think there is a bit of a blurry line between professional industry work versus like personal work, because you can do some of that in that space. I'll give you an example. There's a high school student who reached out to me from India last year, maybe even more than that, early last year. And he had built some amazing demos with our products, with Gemini and with different parts of Google Cloud. He's since published papers. And so we love working with him. He gives us great exposure. He hasn't even graduated yet. He's going to graduate in the next few weeks or months. But he would be a great developer relations hire for a company that is looking for someone that's new, but is just a go-getter, is just really passionate about this space. But I think it depends on ultimately what type of person you're bringing in. We do at Google, we do hire junior, or early career Google developer advocates. But I do think having industry experience helps you be far more successful.
Yes, I 100% agree on that. I have said it many times on X and different platforms that although there can be a lot of passion and things, but like you said, ability to advise. If you haven't grinded yourself in tech and you haven't done that software cycle yourself, you haven't seen how the software is being built and shipped, so you won't be knowing the pain points of what is wrong and where different tools can be used so that you can pitch them to developers or people whom you are communicating to. So because of that reason, you need to grind a bit before, even if you are passionate enough, you need to grind a bit more before you get into this particular space.
Yes, no, whilst I agree with you on the grinding, I guess I'd separate out that university or college is the jumping off point, because we also get people that come from different career paths into developer relations or into tech, right? And so to me, it's more about having the experience rather than what age you are or exactly which qualification you have.
Yep, agree on that. And last two questions. So, what are your thoughts on the current landscape of DevRel? Like, how's the market right now? Is it a declining market? Is it on the rise, or is it just the same?
Um, I can only speak for Google, and I will say that like what I see internally is that we're like still growing, we're still hiring, and we are, if anything, the big thing that we've done is we've upskilled our team in AI and AI tooling so that we can be, again, ahead of the curve in terms of what developers are looking for. So I think sometimes what can happen is that, you consider yourself a DevOps specialist or a data engineer or a software engineer, and you have, that particular developer technology that you're really passionate about, but every developer product has a life cycle, and at some point, DevRel can only have so much impact on that set of products, right? There is a part of the developer product lifecycle where developer relations can add a ton of value, and beyond that, either the product's been successful and is independent and has their own communities, or it didn't make it. But you need to be able to recognize that technology shifts come in waves, and you need to jump off the wave before it like completely fizzles out and moves on. So I think we're going through a massive industry shift with AI, and it's actually, I think some folks are feeling like it's closing up opportunities, but I think what's being missed is the opportunities that it's actually opening up. And we as an organization have tried to identify some of those opportunities ahead of time, take some strategic bets and upskill towards those. So I wouldn't make the statement that DevRel as a whole is in decline, but it's certainly shifting in the way that it's being done in the past. And I think COVID was another great example of that, where prior to COVID, there was a lot of travel that was happening in the industry. COVID forced everybody to stay at home and stay local. And then some of that travel didn't come back. A lot of that stayed sort of hybrid or virtual. And so similarly, I think we're going through some similar shifts like this. But ultimately, if you have a developer product as an organization, you want people to learn it. You want people to hear about it. You want people to be inspired by good use cases. And I think developer relations still plays a really important role there.
Perfect. And my last question, and also on top of that, if you want to add anything, what skills do you think the future developer advocates should focus on beyond content and community?
Beyond content and community, I think every developer relations or developer advocate needs to have a thirst for knowledge. I think you just always need to recognize that you're going to be learning. That is this industry, and that is this role. Is you're always learning. You're always learning about new tools, new frameworks, new technological shifts, whether it's like mobile, cloud, AI, who knows what the next big one is going to be. So invest in a growth mindset for yourself, right? Always have that notion of upskilling. The other thing I want to say is that we talked about burnout, but another topic that's important with like just tech as a whole, not developer advocacy specifically, is this feeling that you're missing out, because there's always something new around the corner, and you feel like, hey, I know this skill set. Should I go take time away to go learn that new thing? There's always going to be new technological waves coming out. You need to pick the right one. You don't need to try and pick everyone. You're not going to be successful. You're going to have very shallow understanding if that's the case. So, pick your interest areas, go deep, because I think going deep and building that deep technical knowledge means that you can also then be specialized and then be able to help someone else. If all you've done is like seen the Hello World example and read some blog posts, and then you're echoing those messages, anyone can do that. So it does require some general specialization. But look, content, community, public speaking. I told you the three things I look for: technical depth, public speaking, empathy. Oh, sorry, technical depth, communication, and empathy. They're the three things I look for. So I think every developer advocate should be doing that and have a growth mindset on top of that.
Amazing. And I would second to all the points, because these are some of the key things that developer advocates should be kind of doing. And hunger to learn should never stop, because this is something that keeps you on the edge, and this is something that would differentiate you from all the others out there. And when you are striving for a role, or upskilling in terms of and creating fancy demos, and people appreciates that. If you are creating near to production demos, you will see that audience is taking you as an industry leader. And if you say write a blog about the industry trends in the next 5 years, and you want people to read that, you need to build that. So that is built over the over the years. You have to build and position yourself in terms of, yes, I have worked on this, I have seen this growing, and these are my thoughts on the future. Definitely people would respect your opinions. But to create that respect for your opinions, you need to work towards that. And it's not only via conferences, it's basically via deep technical expertise. The one of the first things that you mentioned in terms of hiring a developer advocate or being a developer advocate.
Yeah, I think you need to earn your trust not based on which company you work for or what job title you have, but based on actual, like, be authentic and connect with people. We've talked about community a number of times. That is how you build your brand, and also how you can add value.
Yes, and one of the key things in the AI era, where everybody is kind of going to, Gemini or a ChatGPT or any other model out there, and trying to generate blogs and things, I think authentic people who will be writing posts will be valued even more. Authentic blogs, authentic content that is coming out will be valued even more, because people will value those opinions which are not on the internet right now, that are coming right from your brain. That will be valued more. The human connections, human values, the empathy, all these things will be valued even more than before in the coming AI era.
Yeah, that's 100% true. That's the constant, right? Like, your technical skills will change over time, which tools you use and so on. But those other skills that you just mentioned, they won't change. Like, they get better over time, but you're not like, empathy is empathy, communication is communication, right?
Awesome. Well, thank you folks for joining in, and I hope you enjoyed about developer advocacy. Do tag us your favorite moment from this particular podcast on what you learned, understood, or if you have any questions about developer advocacy, do tag Ankur or myself or Keep Simplify. We'd be happy to answer and take those questions. And thank you, Ankur, so much for your time and sharing your own expertise, experiences, and the way developer advocacy works at Google. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome.